Welcome to Behind the Cusp, a podcast diving deep into the layers of self-growth, inner work, and transformation. I'm your host, Marissa Mead, and after 15 years as a digital creator, I'm sharing my raw, unfiltered journey of healing and self-discovery to walk alongside you in yours. Together, we'll dive deep into the conversations that matter most, uncovering what it means to truly evolve from the inside out. This is where you elevate into transformation. So take a breath, settle in, and let's begin. Hello, I'm back for episode 4. And honestly, so excited to film, or I guess record today for you guys. Last week, we had a little unexpected hiccup, I guess you could call it, in the podcast process, which I think was so interesting following episode 3 about surrendering to a process, being in flow, and all of that. Of course, within the week, I have a situation pop up where I literally just have to move in flow. And I think that is so iconic, if you will, of how life goes when you are focusing on something or kind of going through a lesson or learning. Oftentimes things pop up that are going to encourage you, if you will, to step into that lesson. And even though that's something that I've already, quote unquote, gone through on a deep level, the art of surrender and just moving in flow and that reminder is something that's constantly brought up because it challenges me to still walk in that space and place in my life. Last week, here is kind of like the little gist. I'll give you a little bit of backstory so that I can kind of set the tone for what this whole thing is. So here's what happened. I currently spend my winters in Naples, Florida, where I have a home, and then I also have a home in Connecticut, and I spend my summer and fall up here. That's what I've done for the last 5 years. So at the beginning of each summer, I ship my car back north so that I have it there for the summer and can use it and drive it and all of that. Last week, I had my car scheduled for a Tuesday, I think, night pickup, and heard from the guy that's picking up my car that he wanted to pick it up on Monday night just to make his drive a little bit easier with all his pickups. And I was not ready whatsoever for my car to get picked up. I still had stuff to pack and put in the car and everything. I hadn't even started any of that process yet, but there wasn't really anything I could do about it. And I obviously can't fly home with all my podcast recording equipment that was being shipped up in my car. So when he wanted to pick it up on Monday, and I usually record my podcast episodes on Tuesdays so that you guys can get them on Wednesdays, I was like, welp, I guess we are not filming an episode this week. And at first I was just kind of really frustrated because, let me back up. I wasn't necessarily frustrated, but I was disappointed because I've committed to this new venture and wanting to stay on track and just give you guys what I've promised, quote unquote, if you will, from a commitment perspective of the podcast and everything. And so I was like, I don't want to get out of sync and not post an episode and all of that. But quickly I was reverted back into this is the situation that's being handed to me and there's really nothing that I can do about it. It's out of my hands and something that I just really need to move in flow with. And so as soon as I released that quick little feeling that came up of worry or oh my gosh or letting people down or all of that and just moved into flow, it made the whole entire thing easy. I packed the stuff I needed, got it in the car. He picked it up at 9 p.m. that night and I was able to move on with my week. And honestly, looking back, trying to squeeze in a podcast filming and editing and all of that on top of everything else I had to wrap up before I came north would have been really hard last week. So all in all, the universe knows what we need when we need it, and that's exactly what I needed for last week. So it all worked out in the end. Now I am back here at my house in Connecticut. I got in on Sunday night, and it's always an interesting experience coming back here and transitioning my life, I guess. I was sharing this a little bit on Instagram stories yesterday, but while this is my home, and obviously I've lived in this home since 2019, when I spend 6 months away in another home. You just get into a rhythm and a routine and where everything is and have all the things that you use on a daily basis and all that. And then when I come back up here to start the summer, there's always a couple weeks of just adjustments and transitions, clearing out my house, kind of organizing. I leave in the winter, so when I leave, I don't clear out all the winter stuff. I kind of leave it there. So from clothes and coats and all of that is everywhere. And there's even like a Christmas mug still out in my cabinet that I usually kind of put all those away. So there's just a lot of transition that occurs, and it's definitely not easy. And let me say that while also saying I know I'm in a very fortunate position to be able to be going back and forth between two homes. But even with that, and while that's an amazing thing, there are different challenges that come up. And just finding a rhythm and a routine, I'm somebody who thrives in that just routine and being able to have a predictable aspect to my days. So it always takes a couple of weeks of transition. And also to that point, it's hard to leave everything I love about Florida. You know, like my heart is truly in two places. I love my life in Naples and Florida, and it's very reflective, I think, of who I am now in my life. And then when I come back to Connecticut, it's very much like my roots and family and older patterns and lifestyle and all of that. And even coming into my house, there's a lot of things that I don't feel connected to anymore. And each time it's different, like what that thing or things are. There's always like an energetic disconnect. And I think that's really a beautiful thing because it's just indicative of the process of growth. And it always reminds me how much growth can occur in just 6 months of time. That's something that I think we discount a lot and forget how much can truly happen in that span of time and how much power we have to really shift where we are at within just a couple of months' time. And so I'm always reminded of that when I come back home here because I see parts of an old version of me, even though that was only a couple months ago. You know, they're just existing kind of here, left in time, if you will. And I come back and I'm like, oh, I forgot about that, or I forgot I was using that or doing that or whatever. And there's just this clearing out process that occurs. I actually thought of this yesterday when I was just clearing out my pantry and my fridge and kitchen, getting things reorganized and freshened up and everything. I thought about sometimes you'll see these on TikTok, these old homes pop up that were suddenly abandoned and everything is left exactly where the family left it. You know, from 20 years ago or even longer. And you see this time warp of a bedroom that's stuck in the 90s or the 80s or things that were on the child's desk or whatever. And I was like, you know, I never could really comprehend before how that could happen. And now coming home and just seeing where something is exactly where I left it or something I was using or whatever is left there, I can see how that exists because it's like you move from one life into another for whatever reason, good or bad, you know? So anyway, just some kind of reflective thoughts that I've been going through and just kind of where I'm at this week. I am back in Connecticut and I am excited to be here for the summer, spend the time with my family. We have a lot of different just family things kind of occurring right now and shifts and changes and all of that. And so I know this is the place that I need to be right now for both myself and them and supporting one another as a family and all of that, while at the same time kind of going through my own process of transition into the next phase of my life and fully accepting where that may be going. And I don't say accepting in a bad way. I mean accepting, just kind of working through the emotional aspects of that. I realize that might be a little vague, but in time, I think those will be things that we open up and talk about here on the mic. So I just wanted to start this week's episode off with a little, I guess, pulse on where things are at and touch base. It's been a couple weeks. So hopefully by now you have caught up and listened to the first few episodes. Thank you so much for all of your feedback and support and just messages and comments and things like that. I've had so many amazing conversations with people both online and in real life who've been enjoying the podcast so far and how it applies to their life. And for me, that's such a fascinating thing because I think something that when we are going through moments of transition, it feels like it's so lonely and we're the only one or whatever. But when you open up and talk about them, you realize how many people are really in those same places and spaces, and there's so much power in that. To that point, let's dive into this week's topic. And I wanted to craft the entire idea, if you will, behind the word becoming, because this is something that's been in the pulse of the podcast so far. We've talked about this, I think probably in each episode, the art of becoming or the season of becoming or becoming her or whatever. That overall concept has been woven into each of the episodes so far. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to dive into this week, it occurred to me that maybe we don't all know what becoming really is, or maybe we're not even aware of it and how and what that process even looks like. So I wanted to dive into that concept of becoming and talk about that whole phase and what it looks like and open the curtain and kind of the door behind that whole phase of our life. I opened up the first episode of the podcast here with saying, if you are in a season of becoming, this podcast is for you. And I realized this last week that maybe we don't even know what that means. Or maybe we don't even know if we're in a season of becoming. Or maybe we're so deep in that phase that we feel so lost and alone, lonely, isolated. Or maybe we're on the other side of that phase and really becoming her, becoming a better version of who we are, becoming who we really are. There's so many different phases that you may be in, and whichever one speaks to you, beautiful. They're all a beautiful part of the process of becoming. And so today I want to really settle in on what that means, because I don't know if this is a phase that a lot of people talk about. Becoming is really like the in-between. It's that space that no one really prepares you for. It's the hidden moments of growth and transition and phases. It's the moment after the ending. Maybe a phase of your life has ended. Maybe you've just graduated college. Maybe you've moved to a new city. Maybe you just became a mom for the first time. Maybe you are starting a new career. Literally, there are so many things that can end and so many things that can start new. But there's that little bit of time in between the ending of one thing and the full, beautiful beginning of another where you've outgrown who you used to be in that other phase. When you graduate college and you move to a new phase of your life or you move into a new city, there's this transition period of you've outgrown that past version, but you haven't really fully stepped into the next version of who you are or where you're at in life. It's not a glamorous time. It's also not loud. It's very subtle. It's not always clear, and it's kind of fuzzy. That feeling of what is happening, and it can feel really exciting, but be really daunting at the same time because you're like, okay, now what? I know we've all been there, and I know many of us are there. But let's kind of rewrite the narrative on what this time of our life is. It's a beautiful, sacred time. There's so much shift. And whenever I think of this season of becoming, that in-between stage, I think about a flower like right before it's about to bloom. It's in that shell or cocoon, or the petals are all closed and you just see this kind of green outward shell. And then the next morning the sun hits it and it just pops open. Those moments, literally right on the cusp, that transformative moment, it's so beautiful. And that is the stage where Stories unravel, identities shift. Growth happens quietly for us, maybe even feeling like it's underground or behind closed doors. It may feel like you're floating, even untethered, kind of like being brushed one way in the wind and brushed the next way. And yet something deep inside of you knows you're on the edge of everything changing. I also want to acknowledge that sometimes a season of becoming is something we are very aware of and aware of where we are headed next. And also there's other times where there's a season of becoming where we have no idea what's next. And both of these are totally okay. They're totally normal. And you're still in that beautiful process of becoming. When you're in a season of becoming, you don't have to rush it. And I feel like our society overall is really in the mindset of rushing. Everything is rushing. How fast can you do something? How quickly can you move through it? If you sit in one phase or stage too long, it's not good. And that's really not true. You don't have to know exactly what's next. You don't have to rush into what's next. And you don't have to know either of those things to be on the right path. You can be on the right path in your season of becoming, even if you have no idea what's going on. You're allowed to be in that foggy place. You're allowed to be in the pause. Get the pulse. You're allowed to become. The in-between or the becoming isn't a holding pattern. It's actually transformation in motion. It's when everything is truly raveling and unraveling into the next thing. I shared 2 huge moments of becoming in the first 2 episodes and kind of related them to other life lessons or things I'm going through, but in and of itself, both of those things were massive stages of becoming into a new version of who I am. And have contributed to even who I am now. As a side note, I just want to say what's interesting in living your life online is that so much of what I do kind of looks glamorous on the outside. I have always strived to bring an element of relatability and vulnerability to my platform. And I think, like I've already kind of shared with you guys, this is where I feel I connect the most. And that's definitely something that I am proud of because I know that's not easy for many influencers. Side note, you guys know I don't like that word, to do. But something that I think is worth noting is even when there's all of the pretty things going on the outside, there's always this season or stage of becoming on the inside. For example, right now, the whole process of me going from one home to the next and all that kind of looks like this dream life or whatever. But to be honest, it's really hard right now because I'm trying to move through and identify what the next phase of my life is going to look like, and realizing that the life that I've had for the last 5 or 6 years is coming to an end in some ways. Oh my gosh, that makes me emotional. See, I told you guys. It's emotional. I'm so grateful for the life that I have now in Naples, and I love it, and it fills my cup, and the people that I have met, and the friends that I have, and the things that I'm involved in, the people and places and all that. And shout out to all my Naples girlies. I know you guys are listening. I love all of that so much. I'm so happy. I feel so fulfilled there. I'm in an amazing relationship with someone who we are so dedicated to one another in the process of our relationship. And that's become such a beautiful thing that I've seen in action, especially in the last couple of months, as so much has happened in our lives. And all of these things are pushing me into a new season of becoming. And it's like I can feel that I'm being asked to shift out of who I have been and kind of identified with in the last couple of years. So while that looks on the outside like, oh, it's so fun, she gets to go here or there or whatever, I think it's important to remember that there's another flip side of that. And even where I feel a struggle internally of being excited to move my life in one direction and also grieving the one that I'm leaving behind. And that's part of the becoming that I'm in right now. But also at the same time, so much of who I am walking into being next, the foundation of that person has been laid in the last 5-6 years of the life that I've lived. Every version of who we are is kind of built on the previous, and we're able to continue becoming and continue evolving into who we are. Something that I think is also worth noting is how much the before and after is so glamorized in our world and society and things like that. But we rarely talk about the process of becoming and what that really looks like, those deep trenches and the hard things. And as I sit in this season of kind of identifying the next step and transitioning my life into the next step, I would be lying if I said that there aren't times where I'm questioning everything. That's normal. That's a normal part of the becoming process. When you question something like, oh, is this the right thing? Is this the best thing? Should I do this? Like, should I sell my house? Should I not sell my house? Should I, there's so many questions that arise. And it's almost like you question your identity, your choices, your path. Like maybe all these things come up and are in question. And so without going into too much detail in this episode, because this isn't really about that whole process for me, but I am in a deep season of becoming me, if you will. I just want to affirm that even if your becoming season or process is quiet, doesn't mean it's not powerful, because it's really about you. It's about you returning inward to become the next version of you. The season of becoming is also a time when we question so much. We question the path we're on, the choices we're making, even our identity, what needs to come in, what needs to go. How do I want my life to look or feel, or whatever it may be? And to that point, I think that is one of the biggest things that I'm kind of wrestling with right now is like, what do I want my life to look like? How do I want it to feel? These last couple days of being home, which actually it hasn't even been 48 hours yet for me, but I go through such a wide range of emotions. At first I'm hit with excitement and, oh my gosh, I'm home. And then within an hour or two, there's so much overwhelm that just hits me like a wave of, oh my gosh, there's a million things to do and take care of and clean up, and the house and the yard and the this and the that. Then I'm like, oh my gosh, it would be so much easier to just hop right back on a flight and go back to Florida and ignore all of this. But at the same time, this is my responsibility. These are things that I've committed to in taking on a house and all of that. And so I experience so many different things in a short range of time. And I'm then hit with the question of, what do I want my life to look like? If I come north every summer, do I want to spend the first couple of weeks cleaning up a yard and a house and all of that? And the answer, I keep landing in the last 48 hours is no. And so what do I need to transition my life into or to become next to have it align with how I want to feel? You may be in that type of season now where you've moved to a new place, or maybe you just became a mom, or maybe you're working a new job, or maybe you just quit your job, or there are a million scenarios that every single one of us can be in as far as what our season of becoming is right now. But the deep inner wiring of who we are happens here. It happens when things aren't clear. It happens when things feel undone or unsettled or kind of like stirred up. Who we are becomes rewired in those moments because we're pushed into uncomfortable or unfamiliar territory. We are growing, we are learning how to even identify what we need or want or need to speak up and say or ask for. There's also a process of shedding and shifting that occurs, shedding versions and layers of who we were before. And that's never easy, letting go of who you were in a previous version or time of your life. I think about this process of where I'm at now with my life and kind of what I know I want to walk into. But there's also this shedding of who I've been and even grieving that version. Grieving the version of me that I have been. And even if you don't necessarily feel that you're going to miss that version, there's still a grieving there because that's a loss. We kind of talked about that loss and grieving a loss in the episode with my engagement, the second episode. And when you shed, you go into a phase of shift, of shed the layers, grieve the layers, and then you're able to shift into the next version of who you are. Maybe you have to let go of a timeline of what you thought your life would look like. And that is your process of becoming. Maybe you are letting go and shedding a label that you once had, or an attachment, or an identity. The season of becoming brings up all of those things, and in the process, you learn who you are beneath them. Without the identity of whoever you were before, now let's talk about my favorite part of the season of becoming. And this is the unseen growth. For all of my perfectionists and achievers and high performers out there, let me tell you this. Growth doesn't always look like action. Growth is real, even if it is invisible, because not all progress is measurable. The inner work that you are going through in your season of becoming, the rewiring of how maybe you think or do things, the releasing of old patterns, the recentering in the season of life that you are in now, all of this happens in stillness. All of this happens when you can kind of get quiet, observe, think, process, work through instead of hustling. Measurable things are typically what turn us away from the inner work. They allow us to avoid it. Society conditions us to believe that growth must be seen in order for it to be valid, but our souls don't operate on a checklist. Our souls don't operate on a productivity metric or a numbers goal or a scale of any kind. Our soul operates literally in stillness. The beauty of the unseen growth in the season of becoming is that it is the time of integration. It's where you are taking the things that you learned in the previous season or the previous time of becoming, applying it now to deepen the layers of who you are. It may not mean that you're necessarily learning something new. It may just mean that you are absorbing or digesting or integrating things that you've already been through. For example, right now in the process that I'm in and transitioning my life from being in two places and probably condensing that into living in one place next, I'm not really learning anything new in this process. It's really just bringing up opportunity for me to put into practice all of the things that I've already learned in the last years and integrating them into who I am now, aligning my life with how I want it to look or how I want it to feel, or even the choices I've made in the last couple of years. The time of integration, when you are inputting all of those things into practice, it's like you're letting your system catch up to what your soul and your spirit already know. This is such a good example. I've said to my friends in the last months or whatever, my head and my heart are almost there. They're almost connected to make the decision of what's next for me. And that's literally what is happening. It's like my system, my head has to catch up to what my heart or my spirit already knows is what's right or what's best. And that's really part of the becoming process. It's the integration period or even the gestation period of who you're becoming. And that takes time. It's not a delay. It's not a pause. It's not a waste. It takes time to integrate all of those things. Okay, let's pause here and just acknowledge how beautiful the process of becoming is, because it allows the space for us to integrate what we've learned, where we've come from, what we're moving into, how we want to move into the next thing. When it feels like nothing is happening, is actually the most powerful point, because this is where the recalibration happens. Unseen growth, that whole process isn't easily explained. It's not really something that you can sit down and put into words. It may just be something that you feel or even can observe in yourself. You may even appear the same on the outside. In fact, you probably do. Like, your physical appearance may not change very much unless you're going through a lot of becoming from like maybe a health or wellness perspective. But on the inside, you're completely realigning. The becoming process is more energetic than anything. But when you go through this kind of recalibration and energetic process, I think one of the things that is most affected is your physical appearance. When you've made it to the other side of the becoming, people will say things like, oh my gosh, you're glowing, or oh my gosh, you have this glow about you, things like that. This is on the other side of the becoming. But when you're in the becoming, there's not really a physical, tangible thing to identify. And so you realize your becoming isn't visible to other people. When you're in the process of becoming, it's also really important to remember that most people are not going to understand what you're going through. Your partner may not understand, your friends, your best friends, your closest friends, your mom, your sister. Most people are not going to understand what you're going through, and that's okay. But the reason is because the process of becoming, in between, the unseen growth, it's not easily explained. It's not things that are tangible. In that moment is when you need to self-validate or self-encourage or self-acknowledge, because your becoming is real, even if other people can't see it. You have to be able to encourage yourself. You have to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, let's freaking go, or maybe even in a gentler way. You're doing a good job, like, great workout, awesome this, awesome that. You did what you could today, whatever. The profound moments are probably not going to look like breakthroughs. They're going to look like choosing rest or saying no instead of yes to that thing you don't want to go to. Letting go of something that is holding you back. The moment you stop fighting what is and move into flow and surrender, that is growth. The moment you start responding instead of reacting, that is growth. Those are two things we dove into in the previous episode. If you didn't listen to episode 3, I highly encourage you to go back, because we talk a lot about moving from force into flow and into responding from reacting. The beautiful part of the becoming process is it's internal shifts that precede physical evidence. When you've kind of hit the other side of the becoming, you'll oftentimes have people say things like, oh my gosh, like, you look amazing. Like, did you change this? Did you change that? And it's really just that X factor inner glow. And it's not something that happened overnight. It's a result of all of the little things in the in-between adding up. They're causing the energetic shift from who you were before into who you are now. You've allowed your actual energetic frequency to change, to up level, to become better, to become more high level in any way, shape, or form. And when you do this, the right relationships, opportunities, people, ideas, creativity, you name it, arrives. Things flow into you because you are at a place where you're able to receive all of them. All of the little things that add up to your becoming are the micro moments that are building the next version of you. And I love this concept because we often are waiting for the big breakthrough, like the big bang to happen, like the big culmination of all the things. And that might come at the end. But the process of becoming, whether it's a week, a year, a month, whatever, is so many micro moments added up. It is sitting in silence instead of rushing to fix. It is learning to trust yourself even when you're unsure. It's waking up and choosing gentleness over pressure or force. It is responding instead of reacting. The process of becoming is not loud. It doesn't always come with clarity and confidence. Sometimes it comes in little whispers, in still moments, in the surrender of the process. And it is not a pause. It's a preparation for who you are next. The becoming is the slow unfolding of a woman who's chosen to return to herself. And the becoming is also something that you will go through and grow through many times in your life. It is a sacred place. It is where alignment overrides approval. Becoming is where softness becomes your strength. It is where you no longer chase, but you allow. Becoming is the stretch between who you were before and who you are now rising into. And that's not because the old version of you was wrong or bad. It's because you've completely outgrown who that is. And it no longer matches your truth now. And as I say that, I realize how much of a reminder that is even for me right now. Because I identify with that so much right now, especially the part of outgrowing. Coming back home here to Connecticut and to this house, I really do feel that. I feel where I've outgrown this home. And it's not in a way of like, oh, I've outgrown it from a physical standpoint where all my stuff can't fit in here. That's typically what we are thinking about when outgrown. But I've outgrown this home from an energetic perspective because who I am, my frequency, where I am living at, the place that I am intentionally living my life at now is so much more elevated than what this is. The old version of me and who I was before, when I moved into this house, that was a process of my becoming. This home represents so much of the becoming process. When I moved out of the place that I was in before and into this home, that in and of itself was its own process of becoming. And now in the last 6 years, I've gone through another whole process of becoming and evolved to who I am. And then buying a home in Naples was its own process of becoming. Since then, I've gone through more transitions and more processes of becoming to be who I am now. When I look at who I am now, I see where I have outgrown this space. And while it is a beautiful home that I love being in, who I am now doesn't energetically fit here anymore. Even when it doesn't make sense, or even when it's hard to let go of that old version, the becoming is beautiful. My own process of becoming has absolutely asked me to let go of timelines or places that I may have thought I would be in. But those places in and of themselves have contributed to the becoming of who I am now. I've sat in those places of the in-between. I've trusted in the moments of the unseen and believed, even when there wasn't proof of maybe what was happening next, that it was still unfolding and becoming. If you are in that quiet in-between space right now, maybe things feel soft, unclear, foggy, and maybe even a little lonely. I want you to know that you are not lost. You are becoming. This isn't a pause in your story. It is a rewriting. It is a realignment. It's a reintroduction to who you really are, your truest self. You don't have to rush the clarity. You don't have to figure it all out to be on the right path. You're allowed to take your time. You're allowed to bloom slowly. And when you look back, this season, the one that you maybe think is empty, will be the one that changed everything. So thank you for being here, for being in the becoming with me as I walk alongside it with you. If this episode has spoken to you, landed somewhere in your heart, or landed to you deep in the season of your own becoming, I would love for you to share it with me. Come say hi over on Instagram or shoot me a message in any way. Let me know which part of this really spoke to you most. And until next time, trust the season of becoming that you are in. You are right on time. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Behind the Cusp. If you love this episode, I'd so appreciate it if you'd rate, review, or share it with someone else who's also on their path of self-growth. These all go such a long way in supporting the show. Be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find me over on Instagram @StyleCusp and follow the show Behind the Cusp. And as always, keep tuning inward. True transformation begins from the inside out.